Hi again, and welcome back to another episode of Long Shot Ballerinas, a podcast for adults pursuing excellence in ballet. If this is your first time hearing my melodious voice, then welcome. My name is Sasha, and I talk weekly on subjects that matter to adult ballerinas who are striving to reach their fullest potential like I am. This week, we're talking about the ever-controversial, quote, claw hand, and why I think it's an incredible tool, actually, for improving the line and energy of your port-de-bras and your upper body in general. So first, we should start with a little bit of a history lesson in where the, quote, claw hand comes from and why it's all over American ballet, especially in the New York City Ballet. Well, it won't surprise you that George Balanchine was the one to introduce this type of hand hold in ballet. So instead of the French or the Russian way of holding the hand where the last three fingers are kind of kept quite together, the thumb is held in towards the palm, and then the index finger is kept slightly apart and above the three smaller fingers, so that's sort of like a very contained way of holding the hand. This hand is actually held so that each finger is separated and you're able to see all five fingers at all times. So they each get sort of a place in the hand as opposed to grouping the fingers together. Now, the way that the hand is taught in kind of the beginning levels of SAB, and this is according to Suki Shore, I'm not going to quote directly, but Suki Shore in the her Balanchine technique book, a lot of times they start out with a small ball in the hand. And so you're holding the ball to create the round shape with the palm. And then you are touching the top of the index finger with the thumb. So we have sort of this rounded shape. And then later on, they take the balls away, and then they're still kind of creating the round shape with the palm while relaxing the fingers a little bit. And then as you get more advanced, the hand starts to shape in a way that is a little bit more natural. You lose some of that super roundedness that you achieve first with the holding onto that ball. And pretty soon it ends up looking, in my opinion, very relaxed when done properly. So why is the Balanchine hand so controversial? I think number one is a lot of people think that it's an ugly position of the hand. It's spiky, it's not graceful, often accompanied by, quote, broken wrists, which is when the wrist is bent at a 90-degree angle to the rest of the arm. And a lot of people find that to be jarring. It looks like the line has broken entirely from the arm. It sort of stops the length of the arm short from what we know it can be, which is extending all the way from the back through the shoulders, etc. So that is, it's also the opposite of the super contained hand that we talked about from French and Russian way, which is very delicate, can be quite beautiful in and of itself. And then the other problem is that it can make the arms look very rigid and tense. And so if you're not careful, that spiky hand is sort of like a conduit for all the anxiety that you have on stage. So those are problems that can come from using that Balanchine hand improperly or not having total control over the upper body before you're adding kind of that finishing touch. I grew up with this problem myself. I always had an index finger that liked to kind of bend up, and I would sort of grab the air with my hands when I was doing something more difficult on stage, or I'll see if I can dig out a video. It's kind of funny. But I've since remedied that a little bit, but there's definitely a lot of tension in my upper body. I think we all have that kind of in our shoulders. From my musical background, singing, I've always had a lot of tension there. So it's very easy for that to translate if you're using this type of hand into very spiky and not very pretty. So I understand it, but I think there is a really good point. According to Suki Shore in her book on Balanchine technique, the hand was created to highlight each and every finger and to create a look of energy that extends through the arms and out into space. So it's like the finishing touches on the port-de-bras, as opposed to having more of a passive stance with the hand. The hand stays active the entire time. And so you can almost see, if you watch some ballerinas such as like Tyler Peck or maybe Sarah Mearns, when they're moving a little faster, you are seeing them almost play with the air. It's a book by Suzanne Farrell, her autobiography entitled Holding On to the Air, and that comes from something that George Balanchine said to her during a practice. And that's kind of the idea, is it's like the hand is active in space as opposed to just being attached to the body. So I think that in and of itself can lead to a fully engaged upper body as opposed to just passively moving the arms, even if you have a strong back, even if you have strong shoulders. In my opinion, if you are not finishing that sentence, like I tend to do do on this podcast is never finish the sentence. ADHD. I'm doing it again right now. But if you don't have that ending and that kind of, I don't know, like icing on the cake to your dancing, it can look a little bit lifeless and unintentional. So using this in class is something I've been experimenting with. I did not have specific training as a young person with the rubber ball and keeping the hands in a particular position. That was not, I remember using a pen, and that was what my English teacher, well, she was an English person, and she studied kind of the French and Russian techniques. And when we were learning to hold our hands properly, she would have us hold a pencil. So we would put it on top of our middle finger, but under our index and our ring fingers. That would help us keep our thumb in and our middle finger together. And that kind of ends up looking sort of like a little like bird of paradise type of a shape. I don't know. This isn't a YouTube podcast, so I can't show you, but you can imagine. So using a pen or a pencil in your hand is pretty, I would say, common in younger ages. And so once I realized that this type of hand had the potential to help me kind of connect my entire upper body together by always reminding me of what's at the end of my arms instead of always thinking what's at the beginning. It's a common correction to say, move your arms from your back, move your arms from your back. Always use your back to initiate the arms, which is really helpful. But for me, connecting the whole hand with the back has really changed how I move my arms in space. So it's not just, I've got my arms up above my head in a fifth position and they're supported by my back. But then if I'm not looking, I check in the mirror and my hands are looking droopy, or I have let my elbows collapse in. So by thinking about both the base of the arm, but also the very end of the arm, which would be the fingertips, I am reminding myself constantly of where is my hand and where is my hand in space as related to my body, in relation to my body. And that's really important because that reminds me to keep space between the top of my head and my fingertips in my fifth position, which equals longer elbows and a more lifted chest and everything. So it can really amplify and inform your port de bras as opposed to just focusing on being as soft as possible. And while that's important, the energy is what's going to keep people interested in watching you. So if you're someone who wants to be a performer, that is the point. Performers entertain, and you can dance for yourself and experiment with these techniques. But as someone like myself, if you are focused on improving your performance quality, I invite you to try out this technique for yourself for a few weeks, maybe in a few months. It does take some time to get used to holding your hand in a different way. I think just this year, I'm finally learning to have this a little bit on stage and it not looking kind of ridiculous or forced. So it's taken me a couple of years to, sort of bring this into my everyday practice and my practice in the studio and kind of feel comfortable not only just using it in my body, but not being afraid that someone's going to say, oh my God, you have a claw hand. I'm pretty sure one of the kids last year at a rehearsal down at U Ballet, I'm pretty sure I got a correction from someone who was coaching us that was like, Sasha's broken wrists or Sasha's claw hand. Somebody said something and I just had to be like, okay, all right, that's fine. I'm an adult. I'm 30 something years old. I don't have to take this personally, but that is a thing that could happen to you. So just keep that in mind. You may get a correction otherwise if you're starting to experiment with this. And if you do, just explain yourself. It's okay. Just say, I'm trying a new technique. If you bring your little ball into class, and I did that for the first couple of classes, I tried it. Just explain it if somebody asks you. It's not a big deal. We're here to experiment and to learn new stuff. So don't be afraid. And something to keep in mind as you're bringing this into your dancing is that the super exaggerated round shape is not intended to be put on stage. The idea is to reshape the hand so that you've got the roundness of the palm. You're separating the fingers, but it's not in an extreme way. And it's also not intended to be a focus once dancers are in the performing or professional stages of their career. And I'm trying to remember who I heard say this. I think it was on Instagram somewhere, a little video, but one of the current dancers said, or sometime in the recent past, mentioned that the hand stopped being a focus once they got onto the stage. Because the idea is you have this really extreme kind of pose or extreme focus on the hand while you're in training. But then once you get to the performance stages, you're sort of relaxing that and you're letting it go so that the hand stays lively and it is placed, but it is more like you've developed the connection between the hand and the brain so solidly that you're not thinking about it anymore. It is just the way that your hand moves. And so then it becomes very relaxed, very natural, and you're no longer seeing that super extreme, except for in some cases, I suppose, stylistically, but you're no longer seeing the extreme shape of spikiness that I think people get hung up on when they haven't really been trained specifically in this way of holding the hand. And like I said, it seems like, the School of American Ballet, of course, teaches their young students this way, but it may not be properly taught in other studios that may teach a, quote, American style or their own version of the American style. As we know, in order to officially teach balancing technique, you have to be at School of American Ballet. I don't think that they license too many other places to use that. Maybe Pacific Northwest Ballet. I'm probably misquoting this. But again, somebody who's just kind of picked it up, like myself, if I were to teach this to somebody, I wouldn't feel comfortable doing that because this is like, I wasn't taught by someone who's a master. So, you're training yourself, so keep that in mind. But the idea is to eventually you let go of this hyper focus on the hand, and then it just kind of moves along with you in a natural way. Sort of like turnout, right? Like we learn to turn out. Everyone kind of learns to turn out. It's the same end result. You may have different methods of getting there, but eventually the idea is you are able to trust your technique and your training and know that your body's going to do what it's supposed to every time you move into another step. So for instance, keeping your knees out to the side when you do a pas de chat eventually will not be something you have to really think about and turn all of your brain power towards that. Instead, you should be able to, at some point, just perform a pas de chat and think of it in the context of the phrase you're performing or perhaps the role that you're performing. And then that way you're focused on communicating the story, if there's a story or et cetera, the performance quality as opposed to the turnout itself. That becomes automatic. So that's the same idea with the hand, is that you practice and practice and practice, and at some point you let it go so that you can just do the movement and everything functions as you have trained and as you would like to. The other thing I think it helps me with is it brings awareness to the back of my hand, which especially when doing anything where the arm is coming, going down to come back up. So for instance, even from a first position, extending out into, in front of your nose for a first arabesque. So instead of just like I'm moving my arm to my arabesque position, I'm doing this kind of in front of myself to talk myself through it. But from first, I'm thinking, okay, I'm keeping the roundness in the back and the middle of the hand, and then my hand goes out. And so it's just a whole different experience for me personally, trying to shape my hand this way. And so with the back of the hand, or even raising even all the way up from second when you're coming up through, a high élongé, and then you're going to curve up into a high fifth position. So from the second position, you extend the hand and then it comes up and over. That is the back of the hand. And so something about feeling the roundness in the palm of my hand allows me to also focus simultaneously on the back of the hand. And that's that beautiful, like kind of paintbrush effect that we want as the arm comes up and around. And I think that can be effective for any type of port de bras technique. I know the balancing technique has some really specific tenets of moving and crossing through positions and overcrossing the arms and etc. So that is one stylistic difference, but I think this sort of roundness to connect to the back of the hand could be helpful for any style. It also, like I said, it helps me to activate and heighten, I guess, the proprioception of all of the muscles in my arm, my wrist, and my hand. So again, that's like the full entire port de bras. It is all working to connect to the ends of the fingertips. And that is such a beautiful line. When you see it executed properly, just go look at your favorite dancer from New York City Ballet, or even some of the dancers from ABT have similar training where it's just like that entire line continues on. You could almost see it like a laser pointing out the fingertips. And again, that's just something that has helped me connect into my back a lot more than a teacher telling me, use your back to move your arms, use your back. I'm like, I don't know what that means. And I think it's actually something to do with the neurodivergencies that I have. I've read a little bit about this. I'm not going to directly quote because I couldn't send you to the right resource, but I came across something that said we can have troubles connecting large muscle groups together. And so things won't fire for us neurodivergent people in the same way that someone might instinctively get an ab workout from running. I always thought that was the most ridiculous thing. I never understood how that was possible, but apparently it is. But I don't think it is for me. So this, again, thinking about the hand as part of the end of the entire port de bras is really helpful in helping me activate the rest of my back. Don't ask me how it works, but it does, at least for me. So that might be something if you're having trouble kind of getting that fluid motion from the back, and that's a correction you get a lot, which I certainly do. I have really pointy elbows, so my whole arms are just something to constantly be working on, but I'm finding I get it less when I am focusing on the hand in this specific manner. So how to use it yourself. I posted recently on my Instagram story, I think, the preview for this episode. I put a couple of photos together, and two of them were the first two stages of shaping the hand with the assistance of a ball, and after you've let the ball go and you're just holding your hand kind of in a really shaped position. So I'm going to put those as a highlight on my Instagram page. So if you go there, by now it'll be there. You can tap on, I think I'll put the claw. You can tap on that and see those two photos individually. And that is an example of how you can start to shape your hand. The other thing is, I think that there is an article that Suki Shore, I think through Point magazine, helped kind of write. And then there's also a really good section in her book, Balancing Technique, that you can purchase if that's something you're interested in. There's lots of more photos and a little bit more accurate descriptive detail. So I'll link those things in the show notes for you. But anyways, you can go to my Instagram, The Long Shot Ballerina, and see a couple of photos, examples of how you can start to learn this. And again, once you're ready to advance, you'll take the ball out of the hand, keep the roundness of the palm, and then eventually you'll feel the connection to the hands that's much more, it's just integrated with all of the movement of the upper body. Now, a couple of extra notes, maybe pitfalls of the balancing hand is, like we said, if not used properly, it will not look so nice. And it could even lead you to look more amateurish if it's not accompanied by a really solid port de bras. So if you're still kind of letting your arms go behind you, if you've got a lot of port de bras issues, I would suggest not. You want to be really comfortable in how you move your arms and where they go in space when you're adding on to this hand, I think, because we're kind of starting, a lot of us adult dancers are starting up later in life, or you're starting for the first time in life. And if you don't have somebody watching you use this, like anything in ballet, it's best to kind of start on the more conservative side and add layers on, or, hire somebody to coach you, have somebody look at how you're using the hand. So like anything, just keep in mind that this is a little bit more of a specific technique that it's very possible that it won't help you initially if you're not someone who's if you're very beginning. So that's my caveat to this is if you're super, super beginning, you may want to just ensure that you're very confident with port de bras, where your arms go in relation to the rest of your body, the placement of the arms in relation to the shoulders so they're not too far above you, behind you, etc. So once you graduate to the point where you're like, okay, I can do port de bras without really thinking about it, then this is maybe the next layer for you in order to add a little bit more fluidity or more energy in your port de bras, especially for quicker port de bras that happens with maybe petit allegro or quick tendu in the center, something like that. That might be the next step for you, but just be cautious if you are very, very beginning. And then also, if you are using this hand and you're also kind of maybe performing too, be aware you do want to soften this hand for any type of classical ballet role, such as like willies or shades, as it is stylistically incorrect for the era and it would stand out in a bad way. So if for some reason you're a willy in the core or whatever, you don't want to have this hand sticking out because it probably will not mesh with everybody else. So as with any role, the point is to portray a character, and that would not, I think, be quite the Giselle look, in my opinion, but that would be up to your director or whoever's instructing you. So just to clarify that, and if nobody else is doing it and you're on stage and you're a willy, you probably shouldn't be doing it either. You know what I mean? And then no hands are alike. So you might need to adjust the spacing of the fingers to suit your proportions as you kind of play with this hand position. So, somebody's hand might look really good with a pinky that's way out there, and then yours might just look like you're like, pinky out, time for tea. Do you know what I mean? So same with the roundness we talked about. When you curve the middle finger too close to that thumb, I think that's when we get an extreme shape that can hold a lot of tension. So keep that in mind as well. Now, of course, I'm not the world's foremost expert on balancing hand or balancing anything, but speaking from what I have observed and what I have experienced, those are my tips for you. And this is why I like the claw hand, okay? So don't come at me for the claw hand. I think it is a really cool tool, just like a lot of things in ballet. It may not suit you in the long term. It may not suit your performance goals, or it may not suit the teacher that is instructing you. And if you keep getting yelled at for this, then maybe it's not worth it. I'm not sure. That you'll have to decide for yourself. But I think it is a really fun thing to experiment with and see if it informs your port de bras a little bit more, if it helps you connect to your back like it has helped me. And if it has, I would love to know. So drop me a line over on Instagram at the Longshot Ballerina and tell me your opinions. What do you think about the claw hand? Have you tried it before? Do you love it? Do you hate it? Are there some dancers that you know that just overuse it? Or have you seen a dancer maybe at New York City Ballet that is, they have the claw hand, but it's like well shaped and well controlled. I'm really curious to hear on this controversial subject what you feel. So please feel free to drop me a line, or I think also you can comment on the podcast too in some capacity, and I'll see those as well. So thank you so much for joining me this week. This is a shorter one because last week was so long, a two-parter. If you haven't listened to the two-part My Confessional Ballet Dance History, I encourage you to go listen to that. You'll get a little bit better insight into where I'm coming from kind of from now on. And things that I choose to talk about and why. And it's just kind of fun. It gets pretty deep and a little dramatic and fun. So check those out. Next week, we're going to have a really exciting episode. I am conducting a little bit of a poll / submissions call for submissions over on my Instagram. So if you want to be part of that, please keep an eye out. Again, that's at the Longshot Ballerina, and you'll see what's in store for next week. Again, thank you for joining me, for listening this far. Please follow the podcast, share it if you found something interesting, and rate and review. It really helps to get it in front of more people, which means just a bigger community for us. And I'm trying to reach people who have similar goals as me. So if you know somebody, share it with them, and hopefully we can help them too. And we can all learn the claw together. I hope you have a great rest of your day and your week, and I'll talk to you guys really soon. Bye.